invited me. I've taken some liberties with the title that he suggested and so on, and I'm going to go back beyond human history, and I think it's useful every once in a while to do that, just to put things into perspective. So I'm talking about the Mullica Valley. Other people would say that's the Great Bay, Mullica River, estuary, a whole host of things. What I want to do this evening is give you an overview of the valley, talk about the inlet a little bit, but also look into the upper Mullica and provide some perspective there. That would be over hundreds of years, but I'm going to also go back even further in time and talk about what we're calling ghost forests. And in that sense, we may be talking hundreds or maybe thousands of years. And this is part of a new book that I'm working on, so I'm going to try some of this out on you guys. So that black outline there is the Mullica Great Bay watershed. We're just down here a little bit in Smithville, and Norm, this is one of the things I was telling you about earlier. See the striking feature, and it shows up here. If we follow the Holy Ghost, that's where the Garden State Parkway is built on. So if you know something about the geology of the region, you could understand a lot of that. And so I'm interested in that as well. But this is a relief map that shows the valley, the Great Bay system, Mullica, Wading River, Bass River, just to give you some perspective. And you know South Jersey is flat, 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 flat. So this is that relief is magnified there. You won't get a nosebleed going up any of those mountains. But it's a special place in a whole host of ways. And I'm an estuarine ecologist. I work on fishes a lot. So I'll be talking about some things I don't know as much about. But one of the things that's striking about this system is that over the 30 years that I've been the director at the Rutgers University Marine Field Station, which is located here right at Little Bay Inlet, I've been impressed with the system in a whole host of ways. One is and we believe this is real, one of the cleanest estuaries, i.e. where ocean and freshwater mix, one of the cleanest estuaries on the east coast of the United States. For people who haven't thought about it and aren't familiar with it, the first response is, well, that can't be, because that's in New Jersey. Because most people's mental image, unfortunately, is the turnpike and the refineries and so on. But in fact, it's true, because there isn't much industry. I mean, when you talk about industry now, you talk about blueberries and cranberries, and within the watershed, there's not much else. So that in the human population density, you can get lost, and hunters do every year in that valley. So it's unique that way because there isn't much human pressure. It's an exceptionally clean system, and it's well protected. And there are, because of the Forsyth National Wildlife Refuge, because of the Great Bay Wildlife Management Area, because of Bass River State Forest, because of Warden State Forest, it's extremely well and will continue to be protected. So when someone asks me, how big is your laboratory? I say it's about 115,000 acres, because that's what's in state and federal hands, and it's protected. So it's an incredibly unique system. And this gives you some idea. This is the upper Bass River, and so all you see in the background is forest, and in the foreground you see a lot of marsh. That characterizes a lot of this system. So what I'm going to do today is going to try to summarize several approaches that we've taken to understand events over hundreds to maybe thousands of years in the system. So we spent a fair amount of time in helicopters looking over the system. On the other hand, we spent a lot of time in kayaks in the system, at all stages of the tide because it's a remote area. You can't drive everywhere. And we've done a number of other techniques. This is a technique called side scan sonar, and we're looking at timbers on the bottom. So we've used a number of approaches to try to decipher what's going on. And because I'm a fish biologist and so on, I think about things underwater. And that's where I approach, that's how I approach a lot of things. But it's tough to do. You can't see under the water, especially in turbid estuaries and so on. So it's sort of a remote place. And we all know about the pine barrens, and there have been an incredible number of great books and coffee table books written on that. But we know less about what's going on underwater. So that influences my perspective a lot. So again, this is another map of the watershed, and I'm going to talk about this area right in the vicinity of Little Egg Inlet. I'm going to talk about an area a little further upstream, up in the Mullica, and then way up in the Mullica. So those are the areas I'm going to concentrate on. This is a picture of Little Egg Inlet. This comes from a book I completed in 2015. It's called Station 119. It's the history of the Rutgers University Marine Field Station, which was originally a Coast Guard station, Station 119. So that station's been around since 1937. But in the process of putting that book together, I wanted to understand the dynamics of the system. Because anytime you're at an inlet, that's about the most dynamic area you can find on the coast, and that includes the Mullica Valley. So if you can see these dates here, this is 1840. The inlet is here. Tucker's Island, I'm sure you've heard of Tucker's Island. This is the end of Long Beach Island, and this is Old Inlet, or it's variously called Beach Haven Inlet, and so on. But by 1870, that inlet has closed up. Long Beach Island goes all the way down here. Tucker's Island, remnants of it are still here. And Little Beach is over here on the south side of the inlet. And then by 1885, Tucker's Island has joined the mainland. The inlet is still here. Little Beach is still here. This is the approximate location of the Rutgers Marine Field Station, right at the end of Great Bay Boulevard or Seven Bridges Road. And then by 1904, it looks similar, although Little Beach has changed. And then again, 1932, Beach Haven Inlet, the survivor, the successor to Old Inlet, reappears, and New Inlet reappears. Little Egg Inlet is still here, and Tucker's Island is back again. So incredibly dynamic area over about 100 years. So if you're thinking about how humans use this area, just keep in mind that it's very, very dynamic. It changes all the time. It changes, especially in response to winter storms. So incredibly dynamic. During Hurricane or Superstorm Sandy, the ocean tried to form another inlet, and I know a clamor in Tuckerton who actually took his boat out through that inlet. It was short-lived, it sealed itself up again, but incredibly dynamic area. So if you're thinking about Revolutionary War times and so on, remember the inlet has changed a lot over time. And then this is more recent pictures at the end of the inlet. So this is Great Bay Boulevard, Seven Bridges Road outside of Tuckerton. Here's the field station. And this is another image from, let's see, where's the date? This is a 1930 picture, and we can date that picture. This is one of the first aerial photos from the state, and that white scar moving down the peninsula is Great Bay Boulevard. That's when that road was initially constructed. It was going to connect, it was called part of the Ocean Highway. It was going to connect Tuckerton and the mainland to Long Beach Island and to Brigantine and Atlantic City. That was the plan. Never happened. Otherwise, it would be the functional equivalent of the Atlantic City Expressway. Most of the traffic I have to worry about on that road is Diamondback terrapins. So fortunately that didn't happen. So there are a series of aerial photographs that again remind us, even over short periods of time, how dynamic that system is and how much it's changed. Now I'm going to switch gears a little bit and go all the way up the upper end of the Mullica. To give you some perspective, this is the Forks. This is, I think, called Rabbit Island up here. The Badstow is up here. This is Route 542. This is a 1930s aerial photograph. Route 542 is here, and most of you have probably driven by this point here. And you can see a lot of these meanders throughout the system. Here it is here it is today, and so on. So that one reason that 1930s image is so great is because in the 1930s there were all kinds of forest fires, and it burned all the vegetation down. So the aerial images show the watered areas really well. Mark Dimitrov and other people who've thought about the area think these meanders in the system, in the Mullica, in the upper Mullica, date back to glaciation, about 10,000, 12,000 years ago. And it seems to me, I'm not a geologist, but it seems to me he has a good understanding of what's happened here. Some of these meanders are not as evident as in this 1930s image because they've changed a lot. But if you're in a helicopter, as I was in October 2016, you can see one of these meanders. This is the Badstow, below Badstow Village. You can just see the watershed here. This is the Mullica in the background, and you can see, we refer to this as McPhee's meander, in remembrance of what John McPhee wrote about the system and so on. But you can see there's a very different, this is fall of the year, so this is deciduous trees, their leaves are turning color and so on, but the pines aren't. So it sticks out. So those meanders are still there, but they don't have water in them. So those things might be 10,000 years old. So again, there's a lot of interesting geology going on in the system, and it influences the system in a whole lot of ways. So take a look at that meander in the fall of 2016, and you can clearly see it in the upper center of the image in spring of this year, because the vegetation is turning green and so on. It's a lighter green than the pines. So when you think about these systems, remember, we're not just thinking about, since Revolutionary War days, the geology of the area has a lot to do with how we use the system, how we understand the system, and of course the ecology of the system. And these meanders occur elsewhere in the system. This is another helicopter image. This is the Wading River looking downstream. This is the Garden State Parkway Bridge, and you can see how these natural rivers in the system meander over the place. And these oxbows or meanders are common features in the system. They seem to be disconnected. You can tell that the original stream bed went this way, went around, and came back down, but with increasing sea levels, these things are being flooded out. But anytime you see an image like this gives you a good understanding of what it looked like naturally. If you see a linear creek, a linear river, you know that man has had an influence on it. And actually, that's what I wanted to ask you guys about in these prior meanders that I was showing you. I'm trying to figure out if those were closed off by Mother Nature or that was a human thing, because as you know, there was a lot of activity up in the Forks and so on relative to a lot of Revolutionary War activities. And I wondered if they just wanted to straighten the river for shipping. So if anybody has any insights into that, I'd like to know. And then we have more recent phenomena like Superstorm Sandy. So in essence, that storm came right in over the field station. It made little difference because it was about 1,000 miles wide, but it had an influence on the system as well. So that if we piece together some images over time, well, I want to put this in perspective. So on this axis is height in feet, above mean of water, and these are the storms that have influenced the area since the 1940s and so on. So this is the March 1962 nor'easter, and you can see the level of the storms, and this is Superstorm Sandy here, and I think that's Irene there as well. So we've had a number of storms over time. If you talk to people who've been around a long time, they'll often refer to the storm, not the year, because they remember how much of an impact they had. So let me orient you a little bit. This is a series of aerial views of the Rutgers Marine Field Station just inside Mullica Inlet. And they started in the upper left in 1995, 2002, 2007, 2012, 2015. And then there's a summary here, and you can see that you can see how broad this marsh is here relative to this walkway. And this shows you the shorelines from 1995, 2002, 7, 12, 15. Look at the erosion that is happening here. It's about the rate, even just since in 20 years, we are losing that marsh edge at about a rate of about a foot a year. That's dramatic. Again, a very, very dynamic system, and one of it is the proximity to Little Egg Inlet and storms and so on, but the other thing is sea level rise. So again, all these systems that we want to study, want to know about human history, they're changing. They're changing all the time, and we have to keep that in mind. I'm going to switch gears again on you and then start talking about how sea level is beginning to really influence our system. So this is a photograph from a helicopter of that body of water in there. It's called Otter Pond. It's part of Big Creek. It's right outside Port Republic. And you can see typical salt marsh system. This is in the fall of the year. A lot of green trees here, some trees turning colors with the season, but you see a whole swath of dead trees here. These are what we refer to as ghost forests. They're dead, they're still standing, and if you look more closely at them, you can see and begin to interpret a lot of these dead trees, and the marshes are invading the forests. Most of these are Atlantic white cedar. We're focusing on Atlantic white cedar because it's been an important wood for a long period of time. That's what shingles were made out of. That's what ship masts were made out of. But houses and a whole host of things. Because it's light, it's incredibly light, and it's incredibly rot resistant. So it lasts forever. So these trees, even though they've been dead for a long time, are still standing. So these ghost forests, we think, are a signature of sea level rise because they naturally grow in freshwater bogs. They cannot grow in salt water. So when they're exposed to salt water, it kills them. And that's what you have with increasing sea level rise. You have higher tides happening. You have salt water getting further up the systems.
Now, how far up are they, Ken?
Pardon?
How far up the river are they?
This is at Port Republic.
Okay.
This is Port Republic, but it goes on up, and I'll show you on a map in just a second. But there are even older signals of these ghost forests around. So this is the Upper Bass River, and you see ghost forests here, and I talked to the people who lived here, and I asked them how long these dead trees have been there, and they said, well, we moved in 60 years ago and they were there then. Wow. But sea level has been rising for a long time. But at any rate, those dead trees were there. But look at all this. That's all Atlantic white cedar, and it has been buried under the marsh and is being exposed. So I think in a lot of the marshes around here, if you take a metal pole and go out there, you won't go, you'll go in some places where you can push the pole as far as you want, and it'll be all marsh. Other places, you can hear it, thump, thump, thump. And this is buried cedar. People have known about this for long periods of time. People have known about this for hundreds of years. When they initially started cutting white cedar and they decimated most of the trees around, people started to mine the cedar. They would go out with a metal pole, they called it a probe, and they would sound through the marsh muck until they found something. Then they'd figure out, okay, this tree stretches this way. If we cut this in, we can bring it to the surface. And they mined Atlantic white cedar back into the 1900s. These are buried 10, 12, as much as 15 feet under the muck. So how did that happen? Well, they died a long, long time ago. Sedimentation occurred, and with increasing sea level rise, some of these are being exposed. So they're really, really dramatic. The only way you can see this is at a really dead low tide. So there's just an immense amount of that, and our interpretation is, and what you see is, there's some of these trees in the background are living Atlantic white cedars. Some are, well, I'm not sure if those are Atlantic white cedars, but these trees have been around for a long, long period of time, and we think they're being re-exposed with sea level rise. And some of them are quite large. This is out of that otter pond that I showed you. That white part of that kayak paddle is 18 inches long. So that's a big cedar. They used to get that way all the time, several feet across, 4 feet across. And if you looked carefully, George Cook did this, and he published a thing in 1868 where they had looked at some of the cedars growing along Delaware Bay, and you can count, you've all seen the rings in a tree when it's been cut down. They estimated, well, they didn't estimate, they counted 1,000 rings. So some of these trees were 1,000 years old. So some of them grew to be 1,000 years old, died, were buried, and being resurrected. So that we think the Atlantic white cedar, because they last so long, because they're drought resistant, are a good indicator of past sea levels. Again, because they only grow in fresh water, but here they're being exposed to salt water, like in the otter pond here. So our kayaking around the system, one of my colleagues, Pat Filardi, has done a lot of this with me. And wherever there's a symbol, X indicates we have no ghost forest present there. And with there's a black dot, we have presence of ghost forest. So you see, we've looked at a lot of the system. So where we have ghost forests is up in the tributaries. Again, to orient you, this is the Bass, this is the wading, this is the main stem of the Mullica. And so they're really quite common, and a lot of this is Naco Creek here. And I'll show you more right near Fort Republic, more information there. We don't see the ghost forests here, but we think they're present. It's just the marsh sediments are very, very deep. We know they're deep because the pilings at the Coast Guard station, Station 119, the Rutgers Marine Field Station sits on, are 30 feet long. We were trying to do some renovations. They asked, well, how deep are your pilings? We don't know, but they were able to measure their depth Some of the pilings are 30 feet deep and they rest on a sand base. So there's 30 feet of sediments there. So we think possibly those things are buried. And better proof of that is that there's a 1954, it's such a terrible image, I can't show it but in 1954 in the Newark Evening News, there's a picture, and they were building Garden State Parkway Bridge over the Mullica. They used a dredge to dredge holes out so they could build the platforms to support the bridge. They found Atlantic white cedar 40 feet down in the muck. So it's possible that those ghost forests are there. They're just buried. And that would happen with continuing sea level rise. So they're really common features. And I'll give you a specific example and one that, and then the other thing is, aging these things. That's tough to do. But one of the things that gave us some hints about some of these ages are creeks like this, where there are old corduroy roads exposed. A lot of the corduroy roads probably date back to Revolutionary War times. They're really quite frequent. You can only see many of these at low tide because sea level is higher now. But there's about 1.5 feet of sediment on top of that. And this is in a natural area. There isn't much else around. But a couple hundred years ago, people were using that marsh. So that gives us some hints as to how old some of these features are. The place where we spent a lot of time looking into this is Port Republic. Again, Naco Creek, or if you've been here a long time, it's Naked Creek. Goes into the Mullica here. Here's the town of Port Republic. Here's the dam. Used to be the mill pond. Well, this is the mill pond here. So here's the parkway. So we're at exit 44 if you want to get oriented. So up here there is natural living Atlantic white cedar. It's fine. But I want to show you some shots of this area here. So this is a recent sort of Google Earth image. This is what a living Atlantic white cedar forest looks like. Sometimes the trees fall down in windstorms and a whole host of things, but again, that's fresh water. Just a very short distance from there, this is what an aerial photograph. This is the dam. Port Republic is up here. This is a 1930 aerial image. So look at this area here. Well, I'll show you this area. The area in red shows the current shoreline. I'm sorry, it agrees with this shoreline. This is 1930 aerial image. Look how much narrower Naco Creek is then. I talked to the mayor, Gary Giverson, and he told me that the WPA efforts in the 1930s during the Depression dredged out a lot of the channel on this side, and that's why they have basketball courts and tennis courts and so on there. But across the river, they didn't do much. But look at the difference today in 1930. Look at all this marsh here. That marsh is gone. We think it's gone because of sea level rise. And you get a hint of this. This is another aerial photograph. So tennis courts, the beach at Port Republic. Here's the dam. This is Riverside Road, and you can drive there yourself and see this. If you get on Riverside Drive and look right here, you can see some old marsh, and you can see a lot of exposed wood here. So that slide I showed you before, this is the edge of the marsh in the 1930s photograph. And obviously that's going to be different depending on the stage of the tide, but that marsh is gone. And under that marsh is all this submerged Atlantic white cedar. So that cedar wasn't there in the 1930s. We think it's been there a long time. And this is what that looks like. Looking from the dam, you can see all the cedar is being exposed out of the marsh. As sea level has risen, it's washed away the sediments in the marsh, and those timbers are there. And we have more confidence in that because we use a technique called radiocarbon dating. If you ask me to explain that to you, I'll just walk out because I don't know how it works. But it's a carbon isotope, and they can look at that ratios over time. So it's an accepted aging technique, and it's been used for lots of years. So we have samples from some of the timbers right here. They are 500 years old. So in other words, those trees were alive before Columbus got here. So this is the time frame that we think we're working with. This is a work in progress, and we're still trying to get some more dates and so on. But again, I think even if you just focused on human history in the last couple hundred years, it helps to understand the broader history of what has been going on. So again, you can see this. You can see this from your car window. You barely have to slow down to see it if you're there at a low tide. And on the other side of the road, you can see all this process in sort of microcosm. So these are living Atlantic white cedars here. All these dead trees are the ghost forest. The standing dead trees are the ghost forest that I'm talking about. Here you can see a lot of dead trees as well. It's hard to see on this image, but there are dead trees down here as well. And this is marsh. This is Phragmites. But that was a forest. That was a freshwater bog. Now it's being invaded by marsh and salt water. So in that one slide, you can see something that may represent a couple hundred years or maybe even 1,000 years. So this is a slow process, but it's happening, and it appears to be accelerating. And we have a lot more work to do, and one of the techniques we're using is that called side scan sonar. So the principle is the same as a fish finder. You get on a boat, you turn on your fish finder, and you ping off the bottom, and you know what depth you're in, and so on. But this is a multi-beam thing, and it searches the bottom. This is a track from the Bass River just last week, or a couple weeks ago. This midline here is the track under the boat. You can't see under the boat, but it scans to each side. And the way it's mounted on this boat, it gives a clear image to the right. This is all old Atlantic white cedar on the bottom in about 6 feet of water. So 6 feet of water is even, those have been there even longer. They're not up in the marsh, they're deeper. And so these might be even older. And when we were on the boat that day, we were able to take a long piece of pipe that we sharpened fine. We did the same thing that the cedar miners did. We probed around till we found one of these things, sent a pipe down, brought a piece of wood back. I have no idea, hundreds to thousands of years old. Smell that piece of wood, it smells like cedar. There's no denying what it is. So these are really common features, and we're really anxious to figure out what the dates are for some of these. And this is another example here. This may be a larger stump. It picks up linear features, pieces of timber better, and we have to figure out make sure all these are old, not just recent pilings or something from somebody's dock. But as we said, a lot of this is cedar. So these are some of the approaches we're using to try to understand events in the Mullica Valley over the last 100 or perhaps 1,000 years or so. So this is part and parcel of what I'm trying to do. This is a working title of a book that I'm trying to bring together now. But it helps me to, if I understand the geological history, hundreds, thousands of years, then it puts the present into real perspective. So this is where this is coming from, and that's a lot of the that's where I'm going. So I'd be glad to answer any questions. I hope you have questions. If you don't have questions, I'll ask you some.
Ken, there's a story that I've not been able to verify. Go back to 1778 in your mind and think of the British expedition up to Chestnut Neck where they burned the village. At that time, Port Republic was called Wrangleboro. There's a story that seems to have been commonly told that some of the area residents moved up Nakoti Creek, but on the not Port Republic side, the other side, probably down about where maybe Old New York Road comes in and that second bridge is, and along that side, and they had a terrible enough winter there in makeshift dwellings that it got the name of something like, some morbid name, like whatever you would call what do you call that? There's an old Western name for a hill.
Boot Hill.
Not Boot Hill, but some...
Brimstone Hill.
Brimstone Hill, that was it. Brimstone
The
Hill.
story that I heard about Brimstone Hill was because of the tree, certain varieties of trees were more attractive to lightning. And it had lightning strikes, gave it a burning sulfur smell.
But supposedly people lived there. I just wondered, but you know, you put up an interesting picture with it, maybe about 6 slides back, where you showed Nakoti Creek, and that creek was much narrower then.
Right.
And so there would have been much more land then. Well, maybe not there. Yeah. That's much, way back when, much narrower.
Yeah, well, so I should show you.
And we also
So this is the 1930 aerial image, and you can see that that's the point. This is the current shoreline, more or less. This is the 1930 shoreline. So yeah, Dago Creek is much narrower. Much narrower than.
And you answered another question historically for us that we've been struggling with in the British records of Chestnut Neck. The British recorded that when they came in, they thought they had an armed fort, but there wasn't there. But there were 2 forts in the British records. One was at the level where you go through that little gate, and go out there on that filled piece of circular ground. But they said behind it and off to the side was an elevated gun emplacement, and we could not for the life of us figure out where that was. And Gary Giberson, all he could tell us is there may have been a hill back there. But your comment to me before you started about the Garden State Parkway being built on what was probably the remains of an old set of sand dunes from thousands of years ago, and it was elevated in a strip all up and down the coast, and that was the roadbed for it. That would explain the placement, why they could put a gun emplacement.
Yeah, right.
I never heard that before.
If you look at, there is an old map that I've seen that shows there's almost nothing there, but it references Chestnut Ridge. So there must have
Chestnut Ridge?
Ridge, yeah. Yeah, I have a copy of that map.
Okay.
You said they mine,
1850.
they used to mine the white cedar?
Yeah.
What could they use it for when they mine?
There are incredible stories, and you read it often enough that it's true. When they mine some of these Atlantic white cedar, and again 10, 12, 15 feet down, when they cut the edges of this long trunk, it would float to the surface. It refuses to rot many times, and they went right to the sawmill with it.
So what would the effect be if they started mining them again?
I think it's probably prohibitive,
Okay, fine.
I think
prohibited. Yeah.
Isn't cedar outlawed now to sell in New Jersey?
Yeah, I think there's some legal restrictions.
We
to
put
do that.
a cedar fence around our yard, but we had to get the wood from Canada.
Yeah.
We couldn't
No,
get
it's around, and it's like I said. I wish this image from this 1954 Newark Evening News thing was a clear image, and I should have actually, in retrospect, showed it to you, even though it's a terrible image. But 40 feet down, they were getting these timbers, and I said, well, why? And I asked a lot of people, Tuckerton Historical Society, I'm asking you guys now, why didn't we ever hear about this? And John Yates put me in touch with Sam Leifred? Leifred? I'm not sure. Anyway, I talked to him. His father ran the dredge, remembered these stories, and I said, why isn't this in local papers or in the Atlantic City Press? Because these are massive trees, massive, massive trees. And he said, well, probably because these guys recognized their worth and they sold them to a sawmill in Cape May and turned them into shingles. They were making money on the side off these old buried cedars, and that was his version.
There's a house on Mill Street, Fort Republic. It's either one or two houses in towards the old Ford store on your right side. Then in a back room, there is a fireplace mantle was made from one of these cedar logs. And there's a plaque on it. The story I was told about it at the time I saw it was that the person in charge of building that parkway overpass, they hit a cedar log so huge it stopped their equipment.
Yeah.
And the job foreman said, that's mine. And it became, a piece of that became the mantle of the house.
I've heard that story before.
There was a
Where was
plaque.
that house?
It's the first, I think, or the second house in. I haven't been there in 30 years. But it would be one of those two houses.
What I'd like to
I
do.
had friends that were students at what was then Stockton,
Yeah.
Richard Stockton College.
Yeah, right.
It's
right.
now.
Yeah.
But
I would like to, here's what I like to do. I'd like to find out who owns that, ask for permission to go in there and take a core out of that mantle and get a radiocarbon date on it. Now, and I'll ask first.
yeah. Well, like I said, it was in the back room on the back of the house away from the street, and it was a mantle with a fireplace mantle.
I've heard that story before, but I never knew where it came from.
Ask Gary, he'll know.
I've talked to Gary. He hasn't. You think Gary would know?
Gary will know. He may not want to tell you exactly.
Yeah, well, that's,
To
yeah.
protect the innocent or the guilty.
Yeah, well, that's a long time ago.
But now, I find this interesting, the two aerial photographs, because with the sea level rise, the 30s Van Nance shipyard was no longer active. It was almost in front of the church. But there's
Is that where it was in front of the church?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
And you see, there's an outline on the map, the red, of the 1930s aerial photograph.
Yeah.
You've got lots of land showing and a narrow channel. If you look at the same location on the more recent aerial photograph,
Yeah.
that narrow channel is gone and it's full with much more water.
Oh, yeah, right. I know where this is, yeah.
Yeah.
And so the church is where? The church is
Church should be, the tennis courts are there, you go straight up, the driveway comes down opposite the church parking lot. Church isn't quite in the picture.
Okay. Because when I'm here, I spend a lot of time on the road here, looking at this old ghost forest, and I always put the church in the background of my photographs
Yeah.
to help me remember where it is. And so, yeah, that makes sense. It's right here. But you can drive that road, and you can, if you're there at a low tide, you can see a lot of what I'm talking about. So again, I just think that understanding the geological history over hundreds to even thousands of years tells us a lot about what the human history of these areas as well.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Not that I'm disputing the sea level rise, I do believe in that, but I had years ago read that the southern end of New Jersey was subsiding. So how do you know this isn't subduction rather than sea level rise?
Yeah, good question. So this is a published paper. It was published in 2013 by a Rutgers University geologist. And here is, since 1900, here's the global average in sea level rise, globally. But here's sea level rise. These are tide gauges at Atlantic City since 1900, and there is subsidence going on. So again, perhaps because we're drawing water out, but also because of rebound since the last glaciers. So yes, there's both happening. But we happen to be in a part of the world where it's happening more. Sea level rise is more striking because we have sea level rise, because the height of water is more striking because we have sea level rise and the coastline is subsiding. So both things are going on.
Okay. Someone once said to me that South Jersey has only been above water for the last 20,000 years, and since the Earth is 4.8 billion years old, then the normal condition for South Jersey would be underwater.
Well, certainly a lot of the sediments in the aquifer
Yeah.
are old marine sediments.
Yeah.
That's when that sand was deposited there. So again, over geological history, a lot of things have happened. The ocean was over South Jersey, and then when temperatures got cooler, a lot of the water was tied up in glaciers and ice sheets. Sea level shrank, and so our coastline about 12,000 years ago was about 50 miles east of us.
Wow.
So there's a lot that has gone on over, especially since the glaciation. Any other questions?